I remember that fateful night shift like it was yesterday. The dimly lit hospital corridors seemed eerie, casting long shadows that played tricks on my tired mind. It was just me and the relentless hum of the fluorescent lights echoing in the silence. As the hours passed, an overwhelming sense of unease settled in. Every creak, every distant sound sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, I received a call from the nurse's station. A patient's monitor in room 213 had flatlined. I rushed to the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The monitor's eerie, flatlined tone filled the room, drowning out my racing thoughts. As I entered the room, a cold breeze swept past me, making me shiver uncontrollably. There, lying in the dimly lit room, was a figure covered in a white sheet. I hesitated, then slowly approached the bed, my trembling hands reaching for the sheet. To my horror, there was no one there. The bed was empty, but the monitor continued to display the lifeless flatline. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back, my mind struggling to comprehend the impossibility of what I had just witnessed. Just then, a chilling voice whispered from the shadows, "You're not alone in the darkness." My heart raced as I spun around, but there was no one there. I fled the room, racing down the eerie hallways. The hospital seemed to come alive with haunting whispers, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being pursued by something malevolent. As I reached the exit, the lights flickered and died, plunging me into total darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble flashlight to find my way out. But then, I heard it again, that chilling voice, right behind me. I turned to see a figure shrouded in darkness, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. Before I could react, it lunged at me and everything went black. When I woke up, I was alone in the hospital's abandoned room, the first rays of dawn breaking through the windows. It was as if the horrors of the night had never occurred, but the memory of that night, the fear, and the encounter with the unknown still haunt me to this day. And that, my friends, is the story of the night shift that changed my life forever. It was a stormy night when I found myself working the dreaded night shift at the old, decaying library. The rain beat against the windows like a relentless drum, and the wind howled through the creaking eaves, creating an eerie symphony of sounds that sent shivers down my spine. As I sat alone at the front desk, the only source of light was the dim glow of the reading lamps scattered throughout the library. The shelves of ancient books seemed to loom over me like silent sentinels, their pages holding secrets from centuries past. The hours dragged on and my eyelids grew heavy. I tried to keep myself awake with a cup of lukewarm coffee, but it did little to stave off the exhaustion that threatened to overtake me. That's when I heard it, a soft, distant whisper so faint that it could have been mistaken for the wind, but I knew it wasn't. It was a voice calling my name. "Emily," it whispered, almost seductively. I froze in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. Who could be here at this hour? I knew I was alone. The voice grew louder, more insistent. "Emily, come closer." Against my better judgment, I rose from my chair and followed the ghostly voice, which seemed to lead me deeper into the labyrinthine aisles of books. The library had transformed into a maze of shadows, and I stumbled over dusty tomes and ancient relics. Then, I saw her, a spectral figure dressed in a tattered white gown, her hair hanging in wet tendrils over her face. She beckoned me with a skeletal hand, her fingers long and bony. I couldn't resist. I moved closer, drawn by an irresistible force. The ghostly figure spoke again, her voice dripping with sorrow. "I need your help, Emily. Help me find what I've lost." I nodded, unable to speak, as she led me to a dusty, forgotten corner of the library. There, she pointed to an old bookshelf, its shelves lined with ancient volumes. "It's in there," she whispered. I reached for a book and pulled it from the shelf. Inside, nestled among the pages, was a faded photograph of a young woman, her eyes filled with despair. The ghostly figure reached out and took the photograph, clutching it to her chest. "Thank you, Emily," she said. her voice fading as she disappeared into the shadows. I stumbled back to the front desk, my mind reeling from the encounter. The storm outside had subsided and the library was once again silent as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I had helped a restless spirit find what she had lost. The night shift at the abandoned asylum was always a chilling experience, but this night would be one I'd never forget. I had been assigned to the dilapidated building for weeks, and each night brought new horrors, but this night was different. As the clock struck midnight, I patrolled the echoing hallways, my flashlight cutting through the suffocating darkness. The asylum had been abandoned for years, and its crumbling walls and shattered windows whispered tales of despair. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and I could hear the faintest echoes of distant screams in the wind. My heart raced as I turned a corner and saw it, a flickering light at the end of the hallway. I approached cautiously, my every step echoing like a drum beat in the silence. The light seemed to dance, leading me deeper into the asylum's nightmarish depths. As I rounded the corner, I saw a figure huddled in the corner of a room, the feeble light of a candle casting eerie shadows across their face. It was a woman, her clothes tattered, her hair matted and wild. She muttered unintelligible words, her eyes vacant, and her fingers traced patterns in the air. I cautiously approached, my heart aching for the torment in her eyes. "Are you okay?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the asylum's whispers. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto mine with a piercing intensity. "He's coming," she hissed, her voice filled with dread. Before I could react, the lights overhead flickered and died. Panic welled up inside me as I fumbled for my flashlight, but when I turned it on, the woman had vanished, leaving only the flickering candle behind. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to leave, but as I turned to flee, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice that sent chills down my spine. "Welcome to my asylum," it whispered, and a cold hand brushed against my shoulder. I screamed and sprinted through the pitch-black hallways, the asylum's malevolent laughter echoing in my ears. It felt like an eternity before I burst through the front doors, gasping for breath. As I stood outside, trembling and drenched in sweat, I knew I had narrowly escaped the clutches of whatever haunted that forsaken place. The asylum would forever be a nightmarish memory, and I prayed that no one else would ever have to endure the horrors that lurked within its walls. The night had settled in like a heavy shroud as I began my shift at the remote lighthouse perched on the rugged cliffs. It was a lonely job, but the solitude was what drew me to it. Little did I know that solitude could quickly turn into a nightmare. As the hours crept by, the rhythmic beam of the lighthouse swept across the sea, cutting through the darkness like a giant clock ticking away the seconds. The wind howled, and the waves crashed violently against the rocks below, a constant reminder of the power of the sea. I settled into my routine, checking the equipment and jotting down notes. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. An eerie pale light flickering in the distance, far from any known shipping lanes. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on the source of the light. It was a small fishing boat, listing dangerously in the tumultuous sea. Panic set in as I realized there were people on board, waving frantically for help. I immediately called the Coast Guard and rushed down to the shore, desperately scanning the waves for any sign of the boat. The minutes stretched into hours, and I feared the worst. But then, against all odds, I saw the boat emerging from the darkness, battered and barely afloat. The Coast Guard arrived just in time to rescue the survivors. As they pulled the drenched and shivering fishermen to safety, one of them turned to me with wide, terrified eyes. "You saved us," he said, his voice trembling, "but you should never have shown that light." Confused, I asked what he meant. He explained that their boat had been adrift, lost in the storm when they spotted the beam of my lighthouse. They had followed it, believing it would guide them to safety. "But that light," he said, his voice quivering, "it led us through treacherous waters, almost as if it was trying to lure us into the rocks." I glanced up at the lighthouse, its beam now a silent sentinel in the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that something otherworldly had taken control of it, using its guiding light to lead unsuspecting souls to their doom. As the fishermen were taken away, I returned to my duties, haunted by the thought of the malevolent force that had briefly taken hold of the lighthouse. It was a night shift I would never forget, a reminder that even in the loneliest of places there are forces beyond our understanding, lurking in the darkness.